And hi, everybody. We are back again, Beyond Dimensional Podcast. We are at a part 2 with our fantastic guests, Shaun and Claire of Silvercrow. Last we left them just so long ago. We were finishing up talking through how they came to building this business as Silvercrow, how their intuitions led them here, where Shaun has kind of created his witchery and craft. And how her clarings, she's declared that her clarings have cleared her here. And so what we really want to dive into next is the deep work that you do with your clients on building, I want to call recipes or crafting a ritual using all of the incredible nature and greenery that you have described for us previously.
It's interesting because you were the first person I've talked to that sends the person the recipe and the ingredients, so to speak, for them to cast the spell as opposed to doing it for them. So I would love to hear about that as well. So multiple things. You're on. Go for it.
It's again for a great introduction. It's a weird one with spells because I have cast spells for other people on behalf of other people, but what I've found is that spells they act on a kind of psychosomatic level. So it's a spell, it's of you. It takes energy from you, and so when you're casting a spell, it's physical work. It's not something that's kind of something you can do in your lunch hour. It's not. If you pray, if you go to church and you pray, kind of a passive form of manifesting an effective change. You just kind of pray and then you just hope something happens. With spellcasting, there's an actionable part of it. So it takes work and effort to do a spell. And the idea is that when I work with my clients, I will craft the spell for them, and I'll craft it in a way that's very much like a recipe for a food recipe. I'll list out all of the ingredients and the components that they'll use for the spell, and then I'll sort of put the instructions for the spell in steps. Step 1, then do this. Step 2, do this. And so doing it that way makes it really clear for people to cast. They can read it all first and understand what to do, and make sure they understand all the steps. Make sure they've got all of the ingredients that they need. Often, if I send a spell out for someone, particularly, I will sort of send them a pack that has a lot of the components that they'll need for the spell, whether that's candles or whether it's some kind of incense or a particular charm or whatever it is that they need. So I send them this pack with the instructions with the spell, and then they will cast it themselves, and they ask the spell for you, and they're like, "Oh, thanks," but you're not kind of invested. It's like, well, did he cast a spell? Didn't he cast a spell? Nothing seems to have changed in my life. When I craft a spell for someone and I send them all of the spell as a kit, then they essentially then go away and do it themselves. And when they're putting their own effort, their own energy, their own time into it, then they're more likely to invest in the outcome of that spell. So they're more likely to take action. And with spellcraft, it's a lot about sort of connecting the mind and the body together. And really, it's because it's this psychosomatic process, it's kind of like connecting it together in a way where it's an actionable thing. You're taking some form of action towards the outcome that you want to achieve. And the mind doesn't really know the difference between imagination and reality. Minds can be tricked and do it all the time. If there's that sort of experiment where someone puts a screen down the center and then they put one of their arms down one side and then they put a fake rubber arm on the other side of the screen, and then they hit it with a hammer, and the person feels the pain, even though it's just hitting a rubber arm. It's not their actual arm, but it's because the brain is kind of being tricked to think that rubber arm is actually their real arm, and it works on a similar kind of process to that, I guess. It's when you're connecting up these sort of actionable things, when you do an action, when you're doing something physical, mind kind of gets on board with that. And they want to learn anything, how to build a computer, for instance. You can watch loads of YouTube videos about how to build a computer, and you can read books about how to build a computer. But it's only when you actually get all the bits together and you actually build a computer that it actually makes sense. And it's the same process when you're actually sort of putting a physical chord. If you want to cut chords with a person, for instance, if you split with a partner and you want to kind of separate and it's a bit of a messy split, you can have that chord of connection in your mind, but just with willpower, it's kind of difficult sometimes. You might still be texting or you might still be, out of each other's lives. So if you take an actual chord then and you physically cut that chord, because of the fact that you're physically cutting that chord and it's in the physical realm, it's in reality, it's in the here and now, that physical cutting of the chord will also register as a mental cutting of the chord in your mind. And so because of that, you pull your own energy back because you're conscious that you've actually cut this chord with this person. You know that this physical chord represents the chord, the energetic chord you have with the person. So physically cutting the physical chord will energetically cut the energetic chord, and then you pull your energy back. And because you've pulled your energy back, the other person pulls their energy back because they're not feeling the energy from you anymore. And then gradually you drift apart. So the actual actionable part of a spell it's kind of aligning all of that. And because spells work on a system of sympathetic magic, so they work on a system of correspondences. So it's kind of like for like. So this chord is like an energetic chord. So this physical chord is like an energetic chord between two people. And so you connect those things up with your mind, and then that correspondences onto them. So it might be, for a cutting of a chord, they might, like a black candle. Black usually symbolizes a banishment of negativity, negative energy. It's kind of things to do with banishment, with disconnection, with absorption of energy and things like that. So by sort of using light in a black candle at the same time as cutting this physical chord, at the same time as burning incense, that are also to do with sort of severing energy and that kind of thing. The more you stack, then the more it kind of levels in your mind, and the more your body and mind connect up and they sync up together, and then you see actionable outcomes of that because the mind and the body are actioning that thing, that outcome that you want.
So it's a manifestation.
That would
right. It's like helping them, enabling them to learn to manifest on their own through a very specific recipe or process.
Yeah.
That was where it cemented for me the difference between the kind of spiritual manifestation techniques and how witchcraft and spells kind of goes together with it, but also supplements it, but also is more than that. And I think for me, it was the step that I felt, cord cutting is a really good example of that, where, you sort of energetically do that process. And I don't get me wrong, that's a very powerful process and can be very effective. The spell stuff on top, as you explained with the correspondence stuff, is a bit like, well, why wouldn't you? If you're going to sit and you're going to, have your mood board, or you're going to have that and you're going to sit in meditation, you're going to do all those bits and pieces, and you're going to think about doing cord cutting, why not add that extra level in where you've got, two things that are bound with a cord, and then you cut the cord, and it's just felt like it was just that extra step that I certainly hadn't been aware of because I wasn't aware of witchcraft.
It's a reinforcement. It's a reinforcement of the ideas.
Cool sort of framework to that manifestation energy and that focus. So if you can tie those together, and obviously the other part as well that's important, I think you mentioned the calendar, is the letting go part.
Yeah.
And I think that is also really key to it, isn't it? Where it's like you're not obsessing, because everything that people come to you for, obviously it's for an outcome.
Yeah.
So they desperately want more money, or they desperately want to move on from that, or they desperately want more opportunities in their life, or whatever it is. And so it's very hard on a natural human level to not cling to that, Yeah. I think the letting go part is the bit that you've always sort of, impressed on me, that is really key to the end. The end part of the spell is almost as important.
At the end of a spell, you seal a spell. So the sealing part will be, sometimes it's something that you say, it could be a phrase. And in Wicca, in modern sort of Wicca, a common phrase is so mote it be. And that tend to use that as a phrase really. But the idea is it's kind of, you're enacting your will. And when you've finished a spell and you've come to the end, that phrase kind of seals it, and then you release it. And with spells, there'll be some form of releasing at the end, and whether that's burning something, or burying something, or floating something on water, or doing something with cord, whatever it is, there'll be some kind of like letting go process. And then by letting go, you're not clinging to the outcome. You're not obsessing and, you know, looking at your watch and saying, well, why has nothing happened yet? It's been 2 hours since I did the spell. You know, it's you need to do that. The idea is that you kind of release it out there to the universe, and you have faith in your ability. You have faith in your ability. You have confidence in yourself to allow it to just be out there, and then to allow it to manifest in the time that it needs to manifest. And usually it kind of manifests itself within a decent time.
And also in a way that maybe not is not obvious.
Yeah.
I think you've had that as well, haven't you, where you say you want this, and you're so fixated that this will be the thing that will make me happy. This will be the thing that will move my life on. But actually, as we know, hindsight's a wonderful thing. When we look back on our lives and we realize those strange detours in our lives and those unexpected things are actually the most important, sometimes most formative and the most joyous, but we didn't see them coming. We weren't actually in control of those. And I think part of it's the releasing of the control of what you want the outcome to look like. You can start the intention, which obviously comes from manifestation. I intend for the feeling of this. I intend for the version of this in some way, but you know, universe, you can take care of the details. And I think obviously with spells, that's a similar thing where you've got to let it go and let it come back at time in the right way.
Yeah, and it doesn't come back always in the way that you expect. You know, people will sort of phone me and get a spell for this thing, but very often it's not for that thing. They blurt out their whole life stories, and then it ends up being something far deeper than they ever thought it was. And we'll go back to childhood, and then there'll be something in a previous relationship or whatever it is that's kind of triggered the issue that they're having now, but they didn't connect the two together. So I kind of make those connections for them. And then I work on the actual thing, the actual core sort of wound, I guess, in that sense.
So it's therapy plus spellcasting or spell creation. It's like a dual role.
We're not allowed to call it therapy, but yeah.
Trust me, I know. I have a similar challenge. I work with leaders, and I'm an executive coach and a leadership coach, and not mixing the therapy and intuition and reading them is very challenging. In fact, I can't really do it, and I'm trying to learn, because sometimes it's so easy for me when I'm working with someone to literally have the answer or the information intuitively or as a download, that I'm like waiting. I'm just waiting for them to get there, and I can't tell them. But to your point, I hear the whole life. I tend to ask questions that dig, and I get that information because I'm truly fascinated by psychology and humans, right?
Yeah.
But we can't say it's technical therapy. But let's be honest, sometimes it really is, because if you're saying, if I come to you and I say, listen, my issue is that I want to cut the cord with this past partner, and I tell you everything about the relationship and the last relationship and all that, and then you're like, no, this isn't what you're trying to do. It's this. I mean, that's therapy.
You do it as a friend, it's when you offload to somebody as well. But yeah, it's just giving people that opportunity. The consultation part of it is obviously key, because otherwise you can go and you can get an off-the-shelf thing. You can get because kit or whatever they are, and it's a one-size-fits-all thing. And obviously the whole point of that is that you're only ever, like in therapy, treating a surface level.
Yeah.
That's right.
And you're not really getting to the core of it, so then you're not really going to change anything.
Yeah.
I have so many questions about the process of this, because like you're just saying, like it's quite custom. So when someone comes to, they look you up, they book a session, like a consult. If this were traditional treatments, you'd have like sessions, right? You're like, okay, well, we're going to take several sessions to work through this. Or is it pretty much like, let's do the consult, you understand what the issue is at hand, and you go, let me take some time, I'm going to go build all my things. And then you're like, here you go, here's your stuff. And assuming they do all the things correctly, that's it? You never hear from them again? Or are there steps and multiple?
It's a bit of both.
Yeah, it's more the latter one. It is quite A, B, C. But obviously, when people have had some success with something, there is they tend to come back and ask something else, or it might be exactly another layer to it or something. But yes,
it tends to be.
It can be.
It can be several consultations, but usually, it is usually one. And I usually have sort of like an hour consultation, and they'll sort of discuss everything. And I don't know what it is, but every client seems to do the same thing, and they'll tell me a little bit about the thing that they want to achieve. And it might be something like I had one client that was talking about selling a house. She wanted to sell a house. And the house had been on the market for 3 years, and she hadn't sold it, and it was sort of sitting around, and it was costing her money to upkeep this house. She already had her own house, and this was another house that she'd acquired, and so she was desperate to sell this house, and it just wasn't selling, and it was a beautiful house, and she couldn't understand why it was selling. So she came to me asking to sell this house. But after we spoke, and after I dug a little deeper, what it turned out to be was that her mum had died years prior. She'd left the house to her, the will, and this was her mum's house. And what it was because the person who was asking for the spell, while she needed to sell the house for financial reasons, but emotionally she didn't want to let go of her mum, and the house was the only connection she had left to her mum.
Yep.
So rather than looking at dealing with the house, I looked at this thing why she's not letting go of her mum. So I crafted this spell for her, and it was all about letting go. It was a lot about grieving her mum, thanking her mum for leaving her house, thanking her mum for all she did, and basically saying now it's time to let go. And so she did this spell, and then 3 weeks later she sold the house. We hold things in subconsciously without realizing, and we hold them in parts of our bodies. People come to me with pain, even. We hold certain emotions in parts of our bodies, and that can be worked on. But it's usually something of an emotional nature that is causing the physical, actual, real world problem for people.
Mm. Walk us through what crafting a spell looks like. So I know you mentioned that, like, at the end, there's always some sort of like release or cut or something to like end it, as like, here, let's put this energy out in the world, is kind of how I took that. Are there always like a beginning, middle, end? Is it always similar? Are there incantations that you give people to say, or how does it all work? I know that each one is custom, but is there a particular pattern that they have to follow in order to like be a full complete?
Kind of all of the above. In spells, depending on what the spell is and who it's for and what the outcome is, depending on how I do it. I mean, there was one I actually cast a spell for someone a couple of weeks ago, and it was for sort of releasing money blocks and bringing in abundance.
I need that one. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll take that spell. Yeah.
And the spell was based around to acquire the like the fruits of labor. That was the idea of it. To sort of bring in the fruits of their labor, of their work that they've been doing. And so I went away and I crafted a spell that was based around Pomona. And Pomona is the Roman goddess of the fruits of labor, of the fruits of the harvest, and of the fruits of abundance. So I kind of used the sort of archetype, I guess, Pomona, and the sort of energy around the things that she does, the things that she does as a goddess in mythology. And because she's a Roman goddess, I did the spell in Latin. So all of the verbals, all of the sort of incantations were all in Latin. So I wrote it out in Latin and I spoke it in Latin. Again, it's that sort of reinforcing the psychosomatic stuff. If this is about a Roman goddess and you're speaking in essentially Roman, it kind of ties the two together, and for your mind, it ties the two together. But there's also a different resonance in speaking in different languages than what there is speaking in your native tongue. If you're speaking in Latin, there's a different resonance that comes from speaking in Latin than what you get from speaking in English.
So is that like a Google Translate? You just go in there and you say it all and it gives you the Latin version, or do you speak Latin?
I understand a bit of Latin because we use still Latinized words in the English language still. So a lot of it's kind of very similar. So you can kind of get the gist of it, but I don't speak Latin. I kind of translated it on that one.
Any other thing I was thinking it would be to add is that, I suppose, like you say, there's a written element and there's the method and instructions-y part of it. And then there's the physical parts of it as well. There'll all be something physical acting out in a certain way. And I you did one for me, like a sort of like as a birthday gift. It was the first time I'd really actually done one, or sort of all by myself. I felt very like I've gone from being a baby witch to like a like grown up witch. But I remember, exactly that. I had it written out for me, and I had all the things, and I had to place things in threes or on the left or on the right, and do certain bits and pieces. And I think there was that element where the way that you'd worded it was so very clear, but also you've got your own wobbles of like, oh, but do I need to go from the left to the right, or do I move it from the right to the left? And I think you've always been like, certain parts, the parts that I tell you to do specifically are important. Otherwise, it's fine. Like, it's not going to matter if you do it this way. If it says do it, draw it in a circle right to left, that's because it's important. Otherwise, if it's not specifically written down, you can take a little bit of liberty as to how you sort of do it and things.
It's like a lot of witches tend to use left-hand magic and right-hand magic, and the two are very different. People would regard as black magic as kind of dark magic in that sense, and then the other is kind of light magic in that sense, or white magic. But I don't work that way because my whole thing is about balance. So I'm quite happy to do both. I think there's a big misconception with like black magic being like an evil thing, and really there is no color of magic. Magic is magic, and it's only intention that makes the difference between whether it's for positive or negative reasons. And even what people would regard as black magic sometimes can be really useful and for good. So it's not as clear cut and as kind of black, white, evil, good as people think it is, really.
So you're putting the ingredients together. You've written it out. Do you do any kind of like spell over what you're sending? Do you do any hocus pocus with the stuff before you send it off? And part 2 would be, do you ask them to do any type of meditation or grounding before? It sounds like you do, because you kind of explained, some of that, but walk us through those two things.
The sort of hocus pocusy thing, not really. I don't do sort of, it's a weird one because the words are magical. All words that we speak are miniature spells, and everything that we say, when we're having a conversation with someone, words that we speak to other people will have a resonance as well as the emotion and the meaning that's attached to those words. And those words have like an emotional effect on the person that you're speaking to, and it will make them feel a certain way. So all words are spells in a sense. And so speaking any kind of words is important as far as magic goes and in life in general. But I think the big thing with magic that's an important thing is a lot of people, when they're trying to manifest, for instance, things like want to be financially abundant, or I want to be financially secure. But when you're saying I want to be, you're suggesting that you're not currently, because you're saying I want this because I do not currently financially secure. So you're saying I want it. So what energy you put out there is what you get back. So what you get back is more lack, because you're putting out the energy that I don't have this thing. So the idea in magic is that you create everything in the here and now, everything that we have in our everyday lives, everything that we're surrounded with now, the computer, the clothes that we wear, everything we have are already objects of the past, because at some point in time someone else made them or thought of them. Otherwise you wouldn't have them now. So they're all objects of the past. We only create in the present moment. Things have been created, they're objects of the past. And so that's how magic works. You create in the now in order to affect the sort of near future in that sense. So everything in terms of if I say something for a spell, it will always be, it is, or I am, this is, rather than this will be, or this has been.
That's an important distinction. So what are some spells, easy spells, that our audience can do?
The freezer spell. I love this. Was my favorite when I was just talking to a friend about her needing to do a freezer spell. Yeah.
Hold on. Oh, what the fuck is a freezer spell?
Good question.
To the witch.
They're probably one of the simplest spells to do. They're really easy spells. I guess they're kind of the amplification of a voodoo spell, of a voodoo doll in that sense. You use the same kind of magic. So you get a type of magic called contagion magic. And contagion magic is this used to be part of this person, therefore it still is. So the idea is that, for instance, a piece of hair from the person that used to be attached to the person, and then you get it, or it could be a photo, which is the captured image of the person, or it could be a piece of clothing of that person. Whatever it is, take that thing and you hold the person's image in your mind. You sort of write the name of the person, because you're taking their name too, and you put it all into like a little plastic baggie or something and seal it up, and then you put it into a safe container, fill it with water, put the lid on, and then push it to the back of your freezer, and you forget about it. And the idea is that as all of the stuff within that container starts to freeze, as that water starts to freeze with all of that stuff within it, it freezes the person out of your life. And what happens is, because you have physically done this thing, and you're aware that person is, they've been a problem to you for a while, and you try to get rid of them out of your life, and they keep coming back like a bad smell. So you kind of just put them in the freezer, you freeze them up, and as they freeze, what happens is, it's similar to the cord cutting thing. Because you put them in the freezer and you're aware that they're in the freezer, and you're aware that they're starting to freeze. And if you visualize them freezing, and you visualize what happens with water, and you start to see like water starts to solidify and turns to a solid block around them, then they're effectively contained within that block. So because of that, and because you put them to the back of your freezer, you've forgotten about them. And as you forget, then you pull your energy back. And then because the other person doesn't feel your energy still, they're like trying to get to you and you've kind of forgotten about them. Then they get bored and they leave. They pull their energy back because they're not getting what they need from you. So they drift out of your life. And freezer spells are such a simple spell, but they're such a powerful spell. And they always work.
That's the only spell I've ever done for myself, really.
Yeah.
And it does work. And a friend of mine, we used to work together, our friend Chris, we used to walk around and go, they're getting the freezer.
Yeah.
Getting that freezer spell. Let's get that freezer spell going.
So when
Because
the freezer gets full and you've put too many people and you don't have space in your food, that's when you've gone a bit far. But otherwise, go for it.
But either way, another really simple one that we all probably do every day, but we don't realize it's a spell, is stirring your tea. If you stir your tea or coffee in the morning, and we all kind of stir in a certain way. Some people stir anti-clockwise, some people stir clockwise, but you can build in these kind of little miniature spells to manifest the things that you want. And so simple things like, if you're thinking about what you want to do for the day, when you stir clockwise, anything within witchcraft, we cast a circle essentially, and then everything is kind of done within the circle. And when you do things in a clockwise motion, then you're doing. It's kind of you're creating in a clockwise.
Okay.
way. And then when you do it in an anti-clockwise direction, you're undoing anything that's already happened. So by stirring your tea in a clockwise direction, then thinking about the thing that you want to get done, you're kind of like subconsciously telling yourself, I'm doing this thing. I'm getting this thing done that I need to get done today. And if you want to undo something, then you do it anti-clockwise. And, that's just such a simple thing, but you're connecting like a real world thing, and then you're stirring your tea, and you kind of focus on the tea and focus on it swirling around the cup. And as you connect it to undoing and doing, it gives you that kind of psychosomatic thing again. And you can use simple things like that.
And I guess you can layer that as well.
And you can layer that,
by having herbs.
Yes.
So that like a herbal tea would make that into a mini potion. And
these are potions in general. They're potions.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Look, I have herbal tea every night before bed. It's my ritual. I love it. It helps.
What herbal teas do you have?
Oh, whatever is at the Trader Joe's next to my house, the grocer. We like to dabble and keep it fresh, but like a good blood orange. I like a ginger turmeric. I like chamomile's great, like a cozy nighttime, like sleepy tea. I've dabbled in peppermint.
Yeah.
Love a good peppermint.
I love peppermint.
Chamomile, you could do, like, if you have that at the end of the day, you could undo when you're stirring your chamomile, you could undo, because chamomile is about sort of relaxing and sort of relaxing the mind and relaxing the body. If you're stirring anti-clockwise, then you're undoing the stresses of the day at the same time as drinking it. And with orange, with like blood orange, that's a sun fire herb, a fire item in that sense. I call them blood orange is a fire element. That's connected to the element of fire, and fire is all about productivity and creativity, and masculine energy, and leadership, getting shit done. Essentially, orange stirring clockwise would be like the productive side.
I still have that at night though. I'm like, oh, before bed, should I be like, yeah, fire up, or like, should I just not?
Yeah, maybe not
chamomile.
backwards one before bed. Yeah.
That's the chamomile
Indian down. Yeah.
So before we wrap up, I would love to ask you define a witch.
You don't. That'll be the short answer. The long answer is a bit more complicated.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of gatekeeping even within the witchcraft community. There's a lot of gatekeepers that will say a witch has to be this, and you have to do this, and you have to do magic this way. It's not the case. There's no consensus. There's no right and wrong about how magic should be done, how witches should be, and all of that kind of stuff. But really, witches were only kind of determined to be women, specifically in the sort of Western world. Places like some of the Nordic countries, for instance, in sort of Scandinavian countries, places like Iceland, witches were predominantly men. There was very few female witches. Witch really is somebody who affects change with their will. Essentially, they enact their will in order to affect change by using the natural energies and elements that are out there. So,
chapters, things. I don't know how you.
The disciplines. It's
a good word.
There's various different disciplines like potion craft, like spellcraft, like working with energy, like herb lore and balancing yourself with nature and so on. So
there are categories as well, isn't there? Because there's things like eclectic witch is the one that kind of does a little bit of everything, but you've got green witch and you've got kitchen witch and there's as many titles and labels. But
there's about 60 kind of recommended sort of witches. You're kind of like a tree, and you have loads of branches sticking off, and each one's a different type of witch.
Start with baby witch when you're starting.
I need to start there.
I don't even
start with baby.
You know
witch.
what?
That's what.
I manipulate energy, and so I think that's probably whatever that's called.
You're probably a bit beyond baby witch for that, because that's kind of essentially what it is. That's essentially what witchcraft is in general. It's sort of the conducting and the manipulation of energy.
Okay, well,
according to your will. That's essentially what it is.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, we have to wrap up episode 2. Obviously, we're going to ask you guys to come back, because I've already been writing down other questions as we've been talking. I'm like, wait, there's this and there's that. But how do people find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you? And we'll include all of the links and more information in our show notes.
On our website, which is silvercrow.uk. That's the best place. And all of our links and stuff will be on there as well.
Perfect.
We're available on all social medias pretty much as well.
Yeah, and that's all Silvercrow UK as well.
Yeah.
So it's quite easy.
Perfect.
Amazing. Well, we're excited for our trip to Nottingham, because there's many witches over there, apparently. It's a super magical place. So we're looking forward to that.
Show you around. Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us. It's been great.
Yeah.